Three, two, one. Hello and welcome to PFF at Night. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always by Brad Spielberger and Ari Meirov. Brad, how are you doing on this Wednesday evening?
Yeah, doing well. No drama out of Chicago Bears camp as always. So, things are looking good.
Ari, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Obviously, Brad is being a bit sarcastic, and I think we're going to start off in Chicago. So let's get this thing rolling.
Absolutely, yeah. Roquan Smith, trade request. Brad, we'll kick this off to you first. This isn't a major surprise. This is kind of the way that these things go, where the player holds in, doesn't get the deal, then the trade request comes. So what's going on in Chicago with Roquan Smith right now?
Yeah, so just a little bit off the top, stat-wise, he wants to become the highest-paid off-ball linebacker in football. Since he joined the NFL in 2018, his coverage grade per us is 11th among off-ball linebackers with a 78.7 grade, and then he's top 5 in tackles for loss or no gain, and top 5 in sacks among linebackers. So a lot of the stats do back it up, but it sounds like Chicago is struggling to get to that number, around $20 million or more per year. The most recent offer, according to Ian Rappaport, was close, had some, parts of it, de-escalators, a very heavily backloaded deal. So the final year was kind of artificially boosting that average per year. I think the sides are close, and I do still think a deal gets done, but there still is a gap between these two sides.
All right, what do you make of this? Do you think that something gets done before the start of the season? If not, what are the other options here?
Yeah, obviously we'll see if anything comes to fruition. And GM Ryan Poles did speak to reporters yesterday. It was unscheduled press conference and came out and basically said, we intend to still have Roquan Smith here and to find something here, some common ground, getting an extension done. The noteworthy part about all this is that Roquan is doing this without an agent, which I think we've spoken a lot about this with Lamar and some other players who have done this, that sometimes that becomes difficult. And Ryan Poles, when he spoke to reporters yesterday, did mention that whenever you're doing it without somebody in the middle, it is a bit harder than usual because those negotiations, especially a big one like this one, where we're talking about a record-setting deal possibly, the discussion sometimes could go sideways and the player could have some reactions to it where it's like, you guys are acting like this. You don't respect me. It is a new regime. And it gets to a point where he's out here putting a 4-page note letter to Ian Rappaport where he's basically saying, I want out of Chicago. They clearly don't respect me. They don't value me. When in reality, it seems like this new regime does want him. He would fit in a Matt Eberflus defense. The problem is just finding common ground. So I think they still have a few more weeks to figure this out. He is still on the PUP list with an injury. So even though he was technically going to hold in, he's not practicing regardless because of that. And we'll see if something gets done. Obviously, this is a former first-round pick, still someone who's just getting into his prime. And obviously, you want him as a building block for this new regime. So will it get to a point where he gets traded? Probably unlikely. But if things continue to go sideways, it's definitely one to monitor.
Yeah, it's a really good point about he's a younger player too that doesn't have an agent. And I do think that there is a way, for players to represent themselves, but it is a sensitive situation during these negotiations. And there's definitely, ways for feelings to get hurt when you're dealing with money and when, you're dealing with this much money per season as well. Brad, this is kind of a difficult question maybe, but, the Bears, this is a ton of money, like I said, that is being thrown around here for the Bears and Roquan Smith. If Roquan Smith was going to be traded, what do you think the Bears could actually reasonably get in return for him? And does that kind of show what the value is for him and whether they should be, anteing up this much money for a linebacker?
It's a great question. And I think we've seen a shift in the last couple of years. I do think, the Jamal Adams trade to the Seattle Seahawks maybe is a bit of a catalyst for teams to realize you can't really trade top end premium draft capital at a guy that is not at a truly premium position. The off-ball linebacker is not, frankly, on that list. I think they are, a little bit more important with all these teams shifting to two high safeties. That does put more stress on off-ball linebackers. And Roquan Smith can cover, so does some of the things. He's not just, a run stuffing type guy. But you then look at the market and the amount of top end deals that have lasted about 2 years and then guys were cut, Jalen Smith and so many players on that list. It's a great point. I don't see a first round pick in this scenario. Roquan Smith's going to play this year on a $9.73 million fifth year option. And so an acquiring team, I think the one big variable people forget is if you get that rookie contract surplus value in the beginning, and then you give the big extension, that's a big part of the value. Here, the day you trade for him, you're also making him the highest paid off-ball linebacker in the NFL at a position that has had a lot of attrition recently. So I think that also, in a weird way, though, it kind of does give Smith some leverage in that maybe if the Bears thought they could get a first plus, they would be more inclined to do it. But even ESPN's Jeremy Fowler talked to two executives. He put on an article yesterday. One executive predicted it would be a second round pick and one said a third. So, even two guys in the NFL do not see even a single first round pick as a part of a package, which certainly complicates matters even further.
Yeah, and that does seem pretty reasonable because obviously Roquan Smith is a more athletic linebacker. It's sometimes tough for those linebackers to maintain that athleticism with some of the players that you even just mentioned. But Ari, how do you think that factors into the contract negotiations that they might not be able to get a first round pick for him? So is he worth $20 million plus at that point?
It's complicated because, again, this is a new regime, and they made it clear to us early on that they are in a bit of rebuild after they moved on from Khalil Mack and some other guys. But when you have this young linebacker in his 20s, unless you're able to get exceptional value for him, to move on from him, again, as someone who you believe is a building block, the fans believe it's a building block on this roster, to move on from him for a second round pick, a third round pick, or something like that, it's not a great message to your fans or to the locker room. I mean, this is somebody who's a leader for that team and has been exceptional over the last few years. The one thing that I would question is really why the team under the previous regime didn't get a deal done last year before Fred Warner got his deal, before Shaquille Leonard now got his deal in Indianapolis, because clearly that number has only gone higher since, and that's why they're in the situation now with this new regime.
The New York Jets have some offensive line issues right now. Mekhi Becton likely out for the season with a knee injury. Unfortunately, this is nothing new for Mekhi Becton. But the Jets did have Dwayne Brown, we talked about this on Monday, in the facility for a visit over the weekend. Still nothing going there. Joe Douglas, the Jets GM, did speak on the radio on Tuesday and said I think he said the wheels are in motion for Dwayne Brown, but it's now Wednesday at 4:00 and nothing's been done right there. Robert Saleh, the Jets head coach, was talking about the right tackle position today. You've got George Fant at left tackle, and he was talking about rookie Max Mitchell. So it seems like the Jets at least do have an option there at right tackle if Becton is indeed out for the season, if they can't get something done with Dwayne Brown. But I mean, it just seems to make way too much sense to sign Dwayne Brown to a one-year deal. Then maybe you've got your right tackle of the future in Max Mitchell. But Brad, how do you see this all shaking out?
Yeah, it is good to have that option in the building. He graded very well for us in college last year as a Louisiana Ragin' Cajun. But I do think at the same time, when you're trying to build this great, scenario for Zach Wilson, a lot of times these teams really want to see what they have at the quarterback. And you see the Jets with Sam Darnold, it's the opposite. And even, also in New York with Daniel Jones, where it's so hard to truly evaluate the guy if he doesn't have protection, he doesn't have weapons. And so the Jets have done a lot to address both of those issues. But to then have kind of maybe potentially a glaring hole at one of your tackle spots can erode that a little bit. So I do think Dwayne Brown, his leverage probably went up in negotiations. Maybe that's a cause for the delay. And I think they are inclined to kind of get something done and say, why would we do all these things, have 3 first-round draft picks, sign a bunch of players in free agency the last 2 off seasons, and then still kind of let one weak link maybe bring us down? I think they probably will try to get a deal done with a veteran here in the near future.
Yeah, and for Dwayne Brown, he's 36 years old. He's obviously not going to play for free this season. That he wants anything close to a veteran minimum deal. So that's probably what's holding this up. But you think there's anything else holding this up between the Jets and Dwayne Brown?
No, I mean, I think that is exactly what is probably holding it up at this point. Like when we had our show on Monday, when the Mekhi injury originally happened, the original I guess, diagnosis on it was that it was not a serious injury. And that's the way we all thought about it. So adding a Dwayne Brown at that time was more going to be more of a luxury than a necessity. At this point, it feels like this is a necessity for this team, which obviously does not have Becton out for the rest of the year, most likely. And it's really just talking about Mekhi for a second. This is somebody who missed basically all of last year as well. And he came into this offseason with a lot of, I guess, hate when it comes to whether his weight or being lazy and whatnot. And the way he bounced back coming into camp, and Robert Saleh made it clear that he is in shape and he's back to the way he was his rookie year, which would have been a big thing for him. For this to happen, it obviously hurts for the Jets and just for him as well, basically a second consecutive year without him. But again, like Brad said, the Jets have been just all in this offseason with adding pieces next to the young quarterback. To go into this year without both those tackle spots in a good spot will be just not a good thing for him. So Dwayne Brown was probably the number one option coming in. We'll see if they're able to get a deal done. Robert Saleh said the feeling between both sides is mutual. And again, it was a luxury before, it becomes a necessity now, and we'll see if it gets done.
Yeah, and there's probably not a team that makes more sense for Dwayne Brown right now than the Jets. Not a ton of teams that are looking for starting caliber left or right tackles. Let's talk about wide receivers. Jakeem Grant out for the season with an Achilles injury for the Cleveland Browns. Very unfortunate. And, the Browns are one of those teams that there's teams that are haves at wide receiver right now, and there's teams that are have-nots. And the Browns seem like they're one of those teams that are kind of scrambling to find healthy wide receivers right now. Clearly, they've got Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Bell, the rookie. But Anthony Schwartz, who was a third-round pick last year, was actually, I wrote a piece on PFF.com today, risers and fallers. And Anthony Schwartz was a player who was identified as a faller in Cleveland this offseason during training camp, just someone who's not really stood out so far. So, maybe the Browns look elsewhere for wide receiver help. Maybe they just, lean on the running backs, but it's not a great situation there for the Browns at wide receiver right now, because I do think that Jakeem Grant was going to, play a pretty big role in the slot for Cleveland this season. But Brad, what was your reaction to this news?
Yeah, no, like you said, they're not super deep at wide receiver already, I guess, because we are talking, slot targets. It does maybe bolster, giving David Njoku that big time extension at tight end. Obviously, the other franchise tags, tight ends were not as lucky. And now he can maybe even have more usage in that offense. I also think, underrated Grant is a solid returner. I think both kicks and punts this year. He was a kick returner for Chicago last year, who scored a touchdown. It's definitely a notable loss. He is a solid contributor. But yeah, I think those tight ends they have in the building, the two guys they really like and trust, will probably see even more usage now going forward.
Are there any names that kind of stand out that could make sense for the Browns, either in trades or signings? I'm personally a little bit surprised that a guy like Cole Beasley is still out there right now.
Yeah, there are some notable free agents out there, Cole Beasley being one of them. It's probably worth mentioning now, any chance of a Kareem Hunt trade probably goes out the window at this point. They're going to need him in that offense in the passing game even more now. The one thing that I will say is that now that we are starting preseason games and all of that, we're going to see a lot of these pick swap trades going on. We had one yesterday with Adam Shaheen. These guys who are on the roster bubble at other teams, I think we've seen Lynn Bowden in Miami as a name possibly who could be traded as a guy on the roster bubble there. Those guys who might not make the roster elsewhere do one of those pick swaps, a 7 for a 6, like we saw with Adam Sheen yesterday with Miami and Houston. That could definitely be an option for Cleveland if they want to go in that route at some point in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, Preston Williams, also noted by Albert Breer as potential trade candidate, and someone close to Darius Slayton, the Giants wide receiver, told me today that they wouldn't be surprised if he was on the move as well, because he's really fallen down New York's depth chart, and he had a good rookie season, so definitely some potential for him as well if he can find a new home somewhere. But yeah, him and Lynn Bowden would be two guys I would definitely look at. The Broncos have officially sold to Rob Walton. Ari, this is news that seems up your alley. Tell me what you know about how this all went down. Were you surprised that it was a 3-2, 31-0 vote? What do you think about this?
No, not much surprise here. The NFL owners they called it a special league meeting yesterday in Minnesota, where they officially approved the Walton Group as the new owners of the Denver Broncos. The final purchase price was $4.65 billion, the highest price paid for a sports franchise in the United States ever. Walton is now, of course, the richest owner in the NFL by a wide margin of a net worth nearly $60 billion. And today they had their press conference in Denver, and I was watching it. I was waiting for someone to ask if they will be involved with anything when it comes to the football decision making, and they made it pretty clear that is not our territory, that is not our avenue, and that is basically a GM's dream. I mean, what the exact quote was basically, we are big believers in empowering people. We are not going to be calling plays. We are not going to be drafting players, and they're going to leave that in the hands of George Paton and his staff, Nathaniel Hackett and his staff, and they're going to be out of the way. So when you have an ownership group that is just going to give you the resources, do what they need to do, and then let you guys do the decisions on your own. We've seen what George Paton has done over the last couple of years. I think we're all big fans of what he's done there in 2 years, and he still has full control there. And this new ownership group has his full support. So Broncos fans have a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, I think that before the Broncos sold, the uncertainty around that ownership, who the team would be sold to, was kind of a concern for maybe some quarterbacks, head coaches, GMs. Now it's looking really solid there in Denver, because not only does it seem like, the Walton Group is going to be hands off, but, talk about an ownership group with tons of liquid assets. Some of these teams don't have cash on hand to, pay players or to pay coaches or GMs. Broncos have have plenty of that at this point. But Brad, what was your reaction to all of this?
Yeah, I really think on that point, it cannot be, overstated just how important that is. And yes, general manager George Paton obviously didn't know who was going to become owner when he took the job, but maybe he had some inkling, because we've talked before, I think on this show, he's a guy that was interviewed, a dozen plus times for GM jobs and didn't not get them, either pulled himself out of the race or declined interviews, stuff like that. And if it is true the owners are going to stay out of decisions, another thing I think people don't realize, a lot of owners think they're running the world's most expensive fantasy team, and they are making draft picks. They are signing guys or telling their guys what to do, kind of in the same way that Roger Goodell kind of protects the 32 owners and takes all the heat from fans and whatnot. Sometimes GMs do the same thing for their individual team owners, where they get all the blame. And really, for all we know, the owner said, I love this prospect. Let's just take him. I don't really care what you guys think. So if that is true, it is a phenomenal setup for George Paton in Denver. Just the amount of money they'll have access to, but also just getting truly full reins. It goes a very long way in making his job a whole lot easier.
We are still waiting for a decision on the appeal from Peter C. Harvey on the Deshaun Watson suspension. As I mentioned, it's currently Wednesday. The timeline for when this decision is made obviously matters quite a bit for how the Cleveland Browns are going to proceed this season, how they're going to plan out the season. But some reporting from Pro Football Talk, Mike Florio, it even matters this week, because if Deshaun Watson, if it comes out that it's a full season suspension for Deshaun Watson, then at that point, it's possible that he might no longer be able to practice and might not be able to play during the preseason. And the Browns' first preseason game is on Saturday. So if we get a ruling by Friday, that might take Deshaun Watson out of the building for essentially another year in Cleveland. Brad, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, so Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, was able to confirm that the NFL did ask for a full year suspension in their appeal to Peter C. Harvey. And obviously, as we know, Harvey was appointed by the NFL, technically an outside person, but in many ways not really an outside person. I think you mentioned there too is notable is the amount of football that Watson has just not been able to play. If he also cannot play in the preseason, and I think this is an important note, if it's a less than full year suspension, he could participate in the preseason. If it's a full year suspension that goes into effect immediately, like you said, he would not be able to play against the Jaguars. I think it is this upcoming weekend. So it just, the rust stays on and he doesn't get to see that live action for another full year. It is definitely a notable development. And like you said, I mean, this could be decided by Friday, which is, right around the corner at this point.
This is kind of a galaxy brain take, and I think I've expressed this to you guys off the show before, but if I'm the Cleveland Browns, if you're deciding between, obviously they have no say in this. They can't decide how long the suspension is going to be. But like, would they prefer a 12-game suspension or a full season suspension? I actually think they'd probably prefer a full season suspension at this point. I know it does take Deshaun Watson off the field for the preseason. Training camp doesn't allow him to play for 5 games this year, but at least his contract would toll then at this point. So he'd be making $1 million in 2023 rather than this season. That would push back the $46 million that he's currently set to make in 2023. That would push that back to 2024. And then that would also maybe allow them to make another decision at quarterback, maybe get a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe trade for someone in that position to get them through this whole season. If it's a 12-game suspension, which seems like maybe the second most likely scenario here, then what? You put Jacoby Brissett out there for 12 games, hope for the best, get Deshaun Watson for 5 games. I don't know what their playoff chances look like at that point. I don't know. I mean, clearly on paper, you'd rather have your starting quarterback out there for as many games as possible, but everything else points to them maybe preferring a full season suspension. Like I said, they really have no say in this matter. They're on the NFL side, which makes this a little bit awkward. They're not on the NFLPA side, but Ari, what do you make of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Mary Kaykovat actually reported today that the Browns would like to have Deshaun Watson playing on Friday against the Jaguars, which I think is notable in all of this. Like you guys said, what I thought was interesting was yesterday at the owners' meetings in Minnesota, Roger Goodell did answer some questions. And we know that usually when Roger Goodell does a press conference, he has a way of saying a lot of words without saying anything. But he was pretty clear about the reason why the NFL is looking for a 1-year suspension here. And the exact quote that he gave reporters was, because we've seen the evidence. And she was very clear about the evidence, that there were multiple violations here and they were egregious and it was predatory behavior. That is Roger Goodell's words. So clearly they are all in on making this a severe punishment at a minimum of 1 full season. And again, Roger Goodell appointed Peter C. Harvey. It's not like this was jointly approved by the NFL and NFLPA. If Roger Goodell wants a year, I feel pretty strong that Peter Harvey is going to listen to Roger Goodell and eventually hand down a year. That's just the way I look at it. Roger Goodell wants a year. Roger Goodell brought in Peter Harvey. Peter Harvey is going to listen to Roger Goodell. So whenever that time comes, it just seems like we're heading in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL has made, it's no mystery whatsoever that the NFL wants a full year. It was even in, Sue L. Robinson's decision that's what the NFL wanted. I think I misspoke earlier that the Browns were playing on Saturday. It is on Friday, as already just mentioned. And the Browns actually just announced that Deshaun Watson is scheduled to start in that game. So if a appeal decision does come down before Friday night when the Browns are set to play the Jacksonville Jaguars, then the Browns might actually have to scramble at that point and find a different starting quarterback. Clearly, that would be Jacoby Brissett. But it does appear that the Browns are intending for Deshaun Watson to be available for that game. Let's end on a light note, talk about Hard Knocks. The Detroit Lions Hard Knocks season started on Tuesday night. Premiere was a Tuesday night. And personally, I've been a little bit off of Hard Knocks for the last few years. I found the preseason Hard Knocks to be a little bit boring. Haven't paid a whole lot of attention to the in-season Hard Knocks, but I watched the premiere last night. I was enjoying it. Personally, I think the standout line from the show was Dan Campbell saying, "I don't care if you have 1 ass cheek and 3 toes, I'll beat your ass." What the hell does that even mean? Does anyone know?
It's a great question, Doug. It's a great question.
Like, does that mean that they don't care who their opponent is, how weak they are, they'll still beat? I legitimately, everyone was throwing that out there.
No mercy.
But no one was like, yeah, this is what this means. I don't know if everyone else is smarter than I am and I'm dumb and I don't know what that means. But everyone was putting out there was like, I don't know what the hell that means. But Brad, what was your standout moment from Hard Knocks?
Well, I was going to censor my favorite quote of the line, but you just, I think, one-upped it. So I also don't totally know what this means. I mean, I kind of know what it means, but Jamal Williams and his awesome breaking down practice, which that clip went viral even before the episode. But part of it did not go viral when he said, "If you're going to piss like a puppy, stay on the porch." I get what he's saying, but I didn't really, in the moment, I was like, what does that mean at all? But nevertheless, like you said, I do think Hard Knocks had lulled a bit It is all the way back 110%. And I also think it's a funny note. This is Jared Goff's third Hard Knocks in 7 seasons in the NFL, which simply has to be a record at this point.
Yeah, I feel like there's got to be some like very self-aware player on the Lions who's like hearing all of these speeches and be like, what are these guys talking about? Like, this isn't motivating me. I'm just trying to figure out what this guy's saying. Like, I would imagine myself during Dan Campbell's speech, like not listening to the entire rest of it, just being in my head being like, what does he mean by this? But Dan Campbell's fantastic. It's as if it was like a 1980s tag team wrestlers become a head coach. That's what all of his press conferences are like. That's what his Hard Knock season is going to be like. It's been fantastic so far. But Ari, what was your favorite moment?
No, there were so many great moments last night. And you're right, the last couple of years of Hard Knocks have been a bit not so great, probably because of COVID and all the restrictions and how players can't really be around each other and the coaches can't be around each other. But everyone is back and they couldn't pick a better team than this one. Whether it is the coaching staff of all these former players who are just hilarious, when it's Deuce Staley and Antoine Randall and Kelvin Shepard. We got to see some of it at the Senior Bowl when they were there coaching all the young players, and we got to see it now in Hard Knocks. But for me, the moment of the entire episode had to be Aiden Hutchinson singing Billie Jean and getting the entire team to sing along with him. And the best part was really that he messed up at the beginning and everyone was booing him, which was hilarious as well. But they also make you announce how much is your signing bonus before you start talking. And he said his is, I believe, 22 million, and the place went crazy. So all of that was awesome, but getting the entire room to go crazy and to sing along, I mean, that was just epic.
Yeah, I think that one of the keys on Hard Knocks is that you need a really entertaining head coach, because I think the Jets season when Rex Ryan was the head coach was one of the best seasons. And obviously Dan Campbell as well is a very strong, interesting personality. But no, you're right. The Deuce Staley, Aaron Glenn stuff was great. It's good that those guys are apparently best friends, because if not, I think that you get like a full-on coaching brawl during the middle of practice with, how much trash talk that they're talking out there. But I mean, Aaron Glenn, if that Lions team is even like, 8-9 this season, 7-10, he's going to be a head coach in 2023. He was fantastic with the New Orleans Saints. He did a good job with the Lions last year. If that defense has improved this year and looks pretty legitimate, I think that he will 100% be a head coach in 2023, and that's much deserved. All right, that will do it for this Wednesday's PFF at night. Trying to figure out what day it is over here. Follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Follow Ari on Twitter at MySportsUpdate. Throw me a follow at Doug Kyed. Keep it on PFF.com for all of your news and analysis. Still almost a month to go before the season starts, so lots of fantasy updates on there. Get the fantasy rankings. I know that when I'm doing my drafts, I will have it on PFF.com. So keep it there, and we will see you guys again next week, unless something crazy happens at the end of this week, which is always a possibility in the NFL.